Lieutenant Cade Mercer pressed his palm against the cool metal wall of the Valari Orbital Palace, consulting his handheld translator for the third time in 5 minutes. The flowing script of the Valari language seemed to shift and blur before his eyes, and the device's interpretations were maddeningly inconsistent. Sacred Chamber of Renewal had become private washing facility, and then restricted meditation space, depending on the angle he held it. Brilliant, he muttered, running his free hand through his dark hair. 6 months of intensive language preparation, and he still couldn't navigate a simple corridor without getting lost. The message from Ambassador Chen had been urgent. Critical diplomatic pouch in the East Wing. Retrieve immediately. But the palace's organic architecture, all flowing curves and spiral passages, made Earth's embassy seem like a child's building blocks by comparison. Every corridor looked identical, with the same bioluminescent panels casting their soft blue glow across walls that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. Cade turned left at what he hoped was the correct junction, his military dress uniform feeling increasingly constricting in the palace's humid atmosphere. The Valari preferred their environment warm and moist, like a tropical greenhouse, and sweat beaded on his forehead as he quickened his pace. The corridor ahead split into 3 branches, each marked with elaborate symbols that his translator rendered as variations of honor, purity, and sacred duty. He chose the middle path, reasoning that diplomacy was about finding balance. The passage narrowed, then opened into a small antechamber with a single door ahead. The symbol above it was different from the others, more intricate, with flowing lines that seemed to suggest movement. His translator flickered. Chamber of radiant transformation. That sounded promising. Perhaps the diplomatic pouch had been moved to a more secure location. Cade approached the door, noting the absence of guards or security scanners. The Valari were trusting people, at least with their allies. He placed his hand on the bio-reader, and to his surprise, the door chimed softly and slid open. The chamber beyond was awash in golden light, and Cade stepped inside with relief. Finally, he was making progress. Then he looked up and froze. 7 figures stood throughout the spacious room, their pale purple skin gleaming with moisture, dark curly hair cascading down their backs. The Valari princesses, all of them, were in various states of undress, some stepping out of what appeared to be cleansing pools, others being attended to by floating robotic assistants that draped flowing fabrics across their forms. Time seemed suspended for one horrible moment. Princess Talira, the youngest, stood nearest to him, her dark eyes widening as she clutched a shimmering garment to her chest. Her sisters, ranging from the eldest Princess Vessa to the middle daughters, all turned as one to stare at the human male who had violated their most sacred space. Then chaos erupted. The security sirens began as a low hum, then escalated into a piercing wail that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. Cade raised his hands instinctively, his translator dropping to clatter on the polished floor as crimson-armored guards poured through hidden entrances he hadn't even noticed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he shouted over the chaos, but his words were lost in the cacophony of orders being barked in rapid Valari. Strong hands seized his arms, and he found himself surrounded by 6-foot-tall female warriors whose facial markings indicated elite royal guard status. Princess Vessa, the eldest and most imposing of the sisters, had somehow managed to clothe herself in a flowing ceremonial robe during the confusion. Her violet eyes blazed with fury as she pointed an accusing finger at Cade. "Seize him, execute the contamination protocols," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "This male has defiled our sacred chamber." The guards activated energy restraints around Cade's wrists, the blue bands humming with power. He could feel the translation implant in his ear working overtime as voices overlapped in anger and dismay. "Sister, perhaps we should hear," Princess Talira began, but Vessa cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Silence, you are the youngest. You know nothing of the gravity of this violation." Vessa's gaze returned to Cade with undisguised disgust. "No male has entered this chamber in over 1,000 years. The sacred space where we prepare for the ceremony of ascension has been polluted by alien eyes. Ambassador Chen's voice crackled through Cade's comm unit, which the guards had somehow missed. Lieutenant Mercer, report your status immediately. We're detecting massive security alerts from your sector. Before Cade could respond, one of the guards crushed the device under her boot. The ambassador's voice died in a shower of sparks. Take him to the containment cells, Vesa ordered. I must convene the Council of Elders immediately. This incident could shatter our alliance with Earth. As the guards began to drag him away, Cade caught sight of Princess Talira watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Unlike her sisters, who looked at him with horror or disgust, there was something else in her dark eyes. Curiosity, confusion, he couldn't tell. The containment cell was a sphere of smooth metal suspended in the center of a larger chamber, accessible only by a narrow bridge. As the guards secured him inside, Cade slumped against the curved wall and closed his eyes. His diplomatic career was over before it had truly begun. Hours passed before the cell door chimed. Ambassador Chen entered, his usually composed demeanor cracked with strain. Cade, what the hell happened? The entire Valari government is in emergency session. Princess Vesa is demanding your execution as an example to other species. I got lost. Cade said simply. The translator malfunctioned, and I thought I was entering a storage area. I had no idea it was their sacred chamber. Chen rubbed his temples. The Valari take these things seriously. That chamber is where they've conducted their most sacred rituals for millennia. No male of any species has ever been permitted inside. What happens now? The council votes tomorrow. But there's something strange. Chen hesitated. Princess Talira has invoked an ancient right called the voice of the offended. She's claiming the right to speak with you privately before the vote. Cade looked up sharply. What does that mean, honestly? I have no idea. Our cultural attaché has never heard of it being used. But according to Valari law, the primary victim of an offense has the right to confront their offender before judgment is passed. And she considers herself the primary victim. Chen nodded grimly. Apparently, the question is, why? Princess Talira arrived at the containment facility flanked by two silent guards, her ceremonial robes rustling softly as she walked. The meeting chamber they brought Cade to was sparse but elegant, with two chairs separated by a transparent barrier that hummed with energy. You may remain outside, Talira told her guards. The barrier will protect me from any contamination. Cade winced at the word, but settled into his chair as the guards reluctantly withdrew. For a long moment, they simply studied each other through the shimmering field. You're younger than I expected, Talira said finally, her English accented, but clear. When I heard about the human envoy, I imagined someone older, more weathered. Your Highness, I want to apologize again for stop. She held up a hand, and Cade noticed her fingers were longer than a human's, more elegant. I didn't request this meeting to hear apologies. I want to understand something. She leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. In your culture, males and females interact freely. Yes, they work together, speak together, even participate in the same ceremonies. Cade nodded slowly, unsure where this was leading. Yes, that's correct. And you don't consider this unnatural, dangerous? No, not at all. We believe both genders have valuable perspectives to offer. Talira was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the armrest of her chair. For as long as I can remember, I've wondered what it would be like to speak with a male as an equal, not as a superior giving orders to a servant, but as what do you call it? A friend. That's exactly what we call it, Cade said softly. My sisters think I'm being naive, but I wasn't violated by your presence in our chamber. She paused, searching for the word. Fascinated. You looked at us not with lust or conquest, but with shock and respect. You immediately apologized and tried to leave. It was never my intention to intrude on something sacred. I know. She stood and began pacing, her movements fluid and graceful. But that's what troubles me. Why must our most sacred spaces exclude half of all thinking beings? Why are males kept away from our ceremonies, our rituals, our very presence except when we need them to perform labor? Cade watched her pace, struck by the passion in her voice. What do you think the answer is? I think, she said, stopping to face him directly, that we've been afraid. afraid that if we allowed true equality, we might lose our power. But perhaps what we've really lost is the chance to grow. The energy barrier between them flickered, and Talira placed her palm against it. I have another question, Lieutenant Mercer, a personal one. Please, call me Cade. Cade. She tested the name, and he felt something warm unfurl in his chest. At the sound, when you saw us in the chamber, what did you feel? He considered lying, giving her the diplomatic answer. Instead, he chose honesty. I felt like I was seeing something beautiful that wasn't meant for me, and I felt terrible for violating your privacy. Beautiful, she repeated thoughtfully, not shameful or wrong, never shameful. The female form is celebrated in human culture, not hidden away. Talira was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to a control panel and, to Cade's amazement, deactivated the barrier. Your Highness, I don't think, Talira, she corrected, stepping closer. And I want to try something. She reached out tentatively and touched his hand. Her skin was cooler than human skin, and incredibly soft. Your species is so different from ours. Yet we're not so different inside, are we? No, Cade said quietly, not daring to move as her fingers traced along his palm. We're not. The vote is tomorrow, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My sister will demand your death, and the council will likely agree. But I want you to know that one Valari doesn't see you as a threat. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips gently against his. The kiss was soft, tentative, and tasted faintly of the exotic fruits that grew in the palace gardens. When she pulled back, her cheeks had darkened to a deeper purple. I should go, she whispered, but I wanted to know what it felt like to choose for myself. Just once, as she moved toward the door, Cade found his voice. Talira, thank you for seeing me as more than just a mistake. She paused at the threshold. Perhaps you're not the mistake, Cade. Perhaps the mistake is the system that made this meeting forbidden. The palace corridors buzzed with whispered conversations as news of Princess Talira's private meeting with the humans spread like wildfire. Cade remained in his cell, but he could sense the tension building through the occasional updates from Ambassador Chen and the increasingly agitated voices of his guards. The council is divided, Chen reported during his second visit. The older members side with Princess Vesa, but some of the younger nobles are questioning the severity of the punishment. Your princess friend has been making quite a stir. She's not my, Cade began, but Chen cut him off. According to our sources, she's been arguing that the ancient segregation laws are outdated and counterproductive. She's gained support from several reform-minded council members. That evening, as Cade dozed fitfully in his cell, the soft chime of the door woke him. He expected to see a guard, but instead, a hooded figure slipped inside. When she lowered her hood, revealing Talira's distinctive features, his heart leaped. This is incredibly dangerous, he whispered as she approached. If they find you here, they won't, she said confidently. The guards believe I'm in my chambers, and I know these passages better than anyone. She had changed from her formal robes into a simpler garment that hugged her curves more closely. The sight of her made Cade's breath catch. I had to see you, she continued, moving closer. Tomorrow's vote, it's not just about your fate anymore. It's become a symbol of everything that's wrong with our society. Talira, I don't want to be the cause of civil unrest in your people. You're not the cause, she said firmly. You're just the catalyst. The divisions were already there, simmering beneath the surface. My sisters and I have been arguing about reform for years. She reached through the cell's bars and touched his face gently. But there's something else. Something I need to tell you. What is it? I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. I know it's impossible. I know it's forbidden. But I can't stop thinking about you. About the way you looked at me with respect instead of desire. About how you listened to my ideas instead of dismissing them. Cade covered her hand with his own. Talira, I feel the same way. But we both know this can't go anywhere, can't it? Her eyes blazed with determination. What if we changed everything? What if we showed them that love between species isn't something to fear, but something to celebrate? Before he could respond, she had somehow manipulated the cell's controls. The energy bars flickered and died, and she stepped inside. This time, when she kissed him, there was nothing tentative about it. Her lips were hungry, desperate, as if she were trying to memorize the taste of him. Cade's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as their kiss deepened. She was warm and soft and entirely alien, but she felt perfect in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I want to remember this," she whispered against his lips. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want to remember what it feels like to choose my own path." They held each other in the darkness of the cell, and Cade found himself hoping against hope that somehow, impossibly, they might find a way to be together. But even as he held her, he could hear the sound of marching feet in the corridor outside. The vote was tomorrow, and with it, the fate of not just his life, but the future of both their species' relationship. The great assembly hall of the Valari Dominion had never seen such tension. Council members sat in tiered rows, their ceremonial robes creating a sea of purple and gold, while Ambassador Chen and his staff occupied the observer section. At the center of it all stood Princess Vesa, her voice carrying across the chamber with practiced authority. "The violation of our sacred chamber represents more than a simple mistake," she declared. "It is a symptom of the corruption that comes from too much contact with alien cultures. I call for the immediate execution of Lieutenant Mercer and the suspension of all diplomatic relations with Earth." A murmur of agreement rippled through the conservative faction, but Cade noticed it wasn't as unanimous as it might have been weeks ago. Ambassador Chen had been right, the council was divided. However, Vesa continued, "Before we vote, ancient law requires that we hear from the voice of the offended. My sister Talira has claimed this right." Talira rose from her seat in the royal section, and Cade felt his heart clench. She looked radiant in her formal robes, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly. As she walked to the speaker's podium, "Honored Council," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you not as a victim, but as a witness to the possibility of change." The chamber erupted in surprised whispers. This was not the speech they had expected. For too long, we have hidden behind traditions that separate us from half of all thinking beings. We have convinced ourselves that segregation equals purity, that isolation equals strength. But what if we have been wrong? Princess Vesa stood sharply. "Sister, you go too far. The sacred traditions are not sacred simply because they are old." Talira's voice rose with passion. "Lieutenant Mercer's presence in our chamber was not a violation, it was a revelation." In that moment, I saw myself through the eyes of someone who had never been taught to see me as lesser or greater, but simply as an equal. She turned to look directly at Cade, and the love in her eyes was unmistakable. "I have spent time with this human, learning about his culture, his beliefs, his heart, and I have discovered something that should terrify those who profit from our isolation. He is not our enemy. He is not our conqueror. He is simply a person like us, trying to build bridges between worlds." The chamber fell silent as she continued, "I call upon this council to see what I have seen, that true strength comes not from building walls, but from building connections. I renounce my royal privilege of segregation and formally request permission to pursue a diplomatic union with Lieutenant Mercer." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Princess Vesa's voice cut through it like a blade. "You would throw away 1,000 years of tradition for an alien? I would throw away 1,000 years of fear for the chance at love." Talira replied without hesitation. The debate that followed was fierce but brief. The younger council members, inspired by Talira's courage, began to speak of reform, of opening their society to new ideas. The older members resisted, but their arguments seemed increasingly hollow in the face of Talira's passionate advocacy. When the vote finally came, it was closer than anyone had expected. Cade's execution was rejected by a narrow margin, and even more surprisingly, a motion to begin cultural exchange programs passed by 3 votes. But the real victory came when Elder Counselor Thesa, the oldest and most respected member of the assembly, rose slowly to her feet. "In my 3 centuries of service," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages, "I have seen our people grow strong through tradition, but I have also seen them grow stagnant through fear. Perhaps it is time for a new kind of strength." She turned to Talira. "Princess, your request for diplomatic union is unprecedented, But these are unprecedented times. I move that we establish a new ceremony, one that celebrates not just our traditions, but our willingness to embrace change. 6 months later, the first interspecies unity ceremony was held in the very chamber where Cade had accidentally started a revolution. As he and Talira exchanged vows that had been written by scholars from both their worlds, he couldn't help but smile at the irony. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations began with the simplest mistakes. Princess Talira, now formerly Ambassador Talira, squeezed his hand as they turned to face their assembled guests. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, all witnesses to what had become the first diplomatic marriage in Valari history. "Ready to change the galaxy?" she whispered. "With you?" Cade whispered back, lifting her hand to his lips. "I'm ready for anything." As they walked down the aisle together, Cade caught sight of Princess Vessa in the royal section. Even she was smiling, having eventually come to see that her sister's courage had saved their people from an isolation that would have ultimately destroyed them. The wrong door had led to the right future after all.